The night air carried a silence so profound that even the crickets dared not sing. Inside the dimly lit barracks, Captain Armand sat alone, hunched over a wooden desk that had been scarred by years of use. The faint glow of the lantern swayed gently, casting flickering shadows on the walls, shadows that looked almost like ghosts of fallen comrades, reminding him that this path had always been painted with sacrifice. His hands, roughened by years of training in war, trembled slightly as he picked up his pen. The crisp white sheet of paper before him looked endless, almost mocking. A soldier trained to march through bullets and fire now sat frozen, defeated not by the enemy but by the weight of words he had to leave behind. Tomorrow was not just another mission, it was the one he knew would decide the fate of hundreds of innocents, and likely claim his own. He exhaled slowly, closed his eyes, and pictured her Aisha. Her face was the light in every storm he had weathered. The curve of her smile, the warmth in her voice, the way her eyes lit up when he surprised her with simple things like a flower picked on the roadside, it all came rushing back with such force that his chest ached. He had promised her he would return from every mission, no matter how dangerous, and until now he had kept that promise. But tonight, as he dipped the pen into ink, he knew this letter might be his last conversation with her. He began to write, "My beloved Aisha." The ink bled onto the page, his handwriting steady though his heart raced. "If this letter reaches you, it means I could not keep my promise of coming back. Please forgive me, my love. You always ask me why I chose this path, the path of a soldier, and tonight, as I sit with death staring me in the face, I want to tell you everything I never said aloud." His pen moved, but his mind wandered back in time. He remembered the day he first told her he was joining the army. They were sitting under the old banyan tree near her house, the world around them alive with laughter and chatter, but she had gone silent. Her eyes had filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Why, Armand, why must it be you? Haven't we already lost enough to war?" She had asked, her voice breaking. He had taken her hands into his, pressing them against his chest. "Because someone has to stand guard while the world sleeps, Aisha. Someone has to keep our children safe." Now, sitting miles away from her warmth, he wondered if she had ever truly understood. Perhaps she had, but that didn't make it easier for her. He wrote on, "Aisha, you once told me that love makes a man weak, but I want you to know, it was your love that gave me strength. Every bullet I dodged, every night I survived hunger, exhaustion, and fear, it was because I carried your smile in my heart. When the darkness closed in, I thought of you and it gave me light. If tomorrow my blood waters the soil, let it be known that it was not sacrifice but devotion. To you, to my country, to the life I dreamed of with you. That carried me forward." His hand shook as a single tear splashed onto the paper, smudging a word. He quickly wiped it away, afraid the blot would steal clarity from his final words. Soldiers didn't cry, or so the world believed. But in that quiet room, with no one to see, Captain Armand let himself grieve. He grieved for the mornings he would never wake beside her, for the children they had spoken of but never had, for the little home she had dreamed of by the lake with blue curtains and a garden full of roses. He had promised her all of that after his final posting. Now he realized this was his final posting, just not the way either of them had hoped. He paused, leaned back in his chair, and listened. The barracks were silent, but somewhere in the distance a few men whispered, perhaps writing their own last letters. The sound pierced him. It was the collective heartbeat of men who had accepted fate, yet carried hope like a dying flame. He dipped his pen again, continuing, "My love, when you feel the wind brushing against your cheek, know that it is me kissing you goodbye. When you hear the rustle of the trees, know that it is me whispering, I love you. Do not mourn me for long, Aisha. I want you to live. I want you to find joy, even if it isn't with me. Promise me you won't let my absence steal your laughter. If I could write my soul onto this page, it would spell only your name. Armand stopped and closed his eyes. He remembered their last meeting 2 months ago. She had clung to him at the railway station, her fingers gripping his uniform so tightly he had almost faltered. "You can't keep giving me goodbyes, Armand. One day it will be the last," she had whispered against his chest. He had kissed her forehead and lied, "Not until I'm old and grey." The train whistle had torn them apart, and her figure had grown smaller and smaller on the platform until all he saw was emptiness. He had told himself then he would return because she was waiting. Tonight, he admitted to himself, he might never see her again. The lantern flickered harder, as if the flame knew time was running out. Armand scribbled faster. "I do not fear death, Aisha. What I fear is the thought of you reading this letter with tears in your eyes. I cannot bear the image of you breaking, so I beg you, be strong for me, for the love we shared. If my body does not return, let my words be my embrace. And if the stars ever feel too far away, remember, I am among them watching over you." At that moment, his comrade Lieutenant Kabir walked in quietly, his face pale. "Armand, briefing in 10 minutes." He said softly, not wanting to intrude. His eyes flickered to the paper and back to Armand's face. Both men exchanged a silent understanding. Letters were their only legacy. Armand nodded, folding the letter with trembling hands. He placed it in an envelope and wrote her name slowly on the front, as though writing it for the last time. Aisha. When Kabir left, Armand remained seated, staring at the envelope. The weight of that small paper felt heavier than his entire rifle. He pressed it against his heart, whispering into the emptiness, "Forgive me, my love. This is the only way I know how to protect you." Finally, he tucked the letter into his uniform pocket, close to his chest where it belonged. He stood, adjusted his cap, and stared into the cracked mirror on the wall. A soldier stared back, not fearless, but resolute. The night outside stretched endlessly, but dawn would come soon, and with it his sacrifice. For now, though, he allowed himself one final moment of weakness. Looking up at the ceiling, he whispered her name. "Aisha." It was both a prayer and a farewell. The lantern sputtered and dimmed, as if bowing to his unspoken goodbye. The dawn broke cold and sharp, the sky painted in strokes of orange and gray. Captain Armand stood among his men, their uniforms blending with the rugged mountains. The mission had been whispered among them for weeks, a suicide operation cloaked in silence, cut off the enemy's supply line by holding a vulnerable pass until reinforcements could arrive. They all knew the truth. Reinforcements might never come in time. Armand adjusted the strap of his rifle, his eyes scanning the jagged peaks. The crisp air stung his lungs, but his mind wasn't on the battlefield. It was on the folded letter pressed against his chest, its weight heavier than his weapon. "Captain," Lieutenant Kabir murmured, stepping beside him. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. "Do you ever regret it, choosing this life?" Armand paused, the question digging deeper than expected. He thought of Aisha, her laughter, her tears, her arms around him at the station. He thought of the small dreams they had stitched together like fragile fabric. "I don't regret serving," he said quietly. "But I regret the pain it causes the ones we love." Kabir nodded, swallowing hard. "Then let's make sure their pain isn't in vain." The order came, they moved. The climb toward the ridge was brutal. Each step crunched over frost, bitten rocks echoing like a countdown. The men carried more than weapons. They carried letters folded in their pockets, dreams tucked in their hearts, and a courage no enemy could measure. By midday, the enemy was in sight. Dozens of heavily armed insurgents spread across the ridge, their banners snapping violently in the wind. Armand's unit was outnumbered, but retreat wasn't an option. This was the choke point. If they failed, the enemy would sweep through villages below families, children, innocents. Armand raised his hand, signaling silence. His men crouched low, rifles steady, breaths short. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. He whispered under his breath, "For you, Aisha, for all of you." The first shot rang out. The valley exploded in thunder. Bullets ripped the air, grenades split the silence, and men shouted until their voices broke. Smoke and dust swallowed the sunlight. Armand moved like instinct, firing, ducking, signaling. Each command was a thread holding the unit together. His voice rose above the chaos, steady and unshakable, but the enemy pressed harder. More and more swarmed the ridge, their fire relentless. One by one, Armand saw his men fall, Kabir dragging a wounded soldier to cover, another clutching his chest before collapsing. Blood stained the snow, crimson against white. Armand's chest heaved, his shoulder burned from a graze, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. The ridge had to hold. He grabbed his radio, static crackling. "Base, this is Eagle 1. We need immediate reinforcement. Do you copy?" Only silence answered. Gritting his teeth, he pressed on. He felt the letter pressing against his heart, as though Aisha herself was holding him upright. Every time despair clawed at him, he pictured her face and the future she deserved. A future free of war echoing through her nights. Hours dragged like years. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the battlefield. The enemy surged one final time, their numbers overwhelming. Armand knew then, this was it. Kabir, he shouted, take the remaining men back, fall to secondary cover. Kabir shook his head violently. "I won't leave you, Captain. You will." Armand barked, eyes blazing. "That's an order. Go. Save who you can." Kabir's lips trembled, but he saluted, dragging the survivors with him. Armand turned back, his rifle steady, though his body screamed. Alone now, he fired into the oncoming wave, every bullet a heartbeat, every heartbeat a goodbye. A grenade landed near him. For a split second, time froze. Armand's thoughts didn't run to fear, they ran to her. Aisha, he saw her laughter, the way her hair caught the sunlight, the warmth of her hands. He whispered her name like a prayer as the explosion swallowed him whole, the ridge held. His sacrifice became its cornerstone. Miles away, in a quiet town far removed from the smoke and fire, Aisha watered the roses in her garden. The sun was soft that morning, and the air carried no sign of death. Yet her chest ached, a heaviness she couldn't explain. She paused, looking up at the sky, whispering, "Come home soon, Armand." 3 days later, 2 men in uniform knocked at her door. She knew before she opened it. Her knees buckled, her breath shattered, and the world tilted off its axis. They didn't have to say the words. She saw it in their eyes, the pity, the sorrow, the respect. They handed her a folded flag, his medals, and finally, an envelope. Her hands trembled violently as she took it, recognizing the familiar handwriting on the front. Her name. She locked herself in her room, clutching the envelope to her chest for hours before daring to open it. When she finally tore it open, his words spilled into her lap, each sentence a dagger and a bomb. "My beloved Aisha, if this letter reaches you, it means I could not keep my promise of coming back." Her sobs tore through the silence, raw and unrelenting. She pressed the letter to her lips, kissing the ink where his hand had once moved. Each word was him, his voice, his touch, his soul. "Do not mourn me for long, Aisha. I want you to live. When you feel the wind, know it is me kissing you goodbye. When you see the stars, know I am among them, watching over you." She collapsed onto the floor, clutching the paper as if it were his body. The room blurred through her tears. She read and reread until the words etched themselves into her soul. Days became weeks. Neighbors came with condolences. Relatives whispered words of comfort. But Aisha drifted through it all like a shadow. At night, she sat by the window, the letter in her lap, looking at the stars. She whispered to them, "I'm trying, Armand. I'm trying to live like you asked." She planted more roses in the garden, each bloom a tribute to him. And sometimes, when the wind brushed her cheek, she closed her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like he was still there, whispering his love. Captain Armand's name was etched into stone as a hero who saved hundreds. But to Aisha, he was not just a hero. He was her love, her life, her forever goodbye. And though the world moved on, She carried his letter like a heartbeat. Every word inked onto that fragile page kept her alive, even in the emptiness of his absence, because love, she realized, does not die with the body. It lives in letters, in memories, in the spaces between breaths. It lives forever,